Are we good? Are we echoing still? I can't hear the echo. Okay. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. Uh, Before we read the Torah portion, I'm going to give a blessing. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm actually going to sing the blessing in English, not Hebrew. And you're welcome to join in. You might be familiar with the song or the tune, although I've changed the words a little bit, slightly, from what you might be used to, or maybe not. You may not even be used to this song at all. It's based on Psalm 19. Psalm 19, beginning with verse 7 or 8, depending upon whether you're using a Hebrew Bible or an English one. And that verse, I think maybe we'll just make it simple in that, because that's actually one of the thoughts behind it, making wise the simple. And we'll sing that verse, and then we'll sing verse 10 or 11 as the chorus, and then go back and sing the verse 7 or 8, and then verse 10 or 11 again. So the second time, we'll do it twice. That way you can maybe continue, you can pick it up perhaps. Give you a second chance, right? Okay. The Torah of Jehovah is perfect, restoring the soul. The instruction of Jehovah is sure, making wise the simple. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the drippings of the honeycomb. The Torah of Jehovah is perfect, restoring the soul. The instruction of Jehovah is sure, making wise the simple. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the drippings of the honeycomb. This is our blessing. And the reason I wanted you to sing along with me is because I realized today, talking to others, I was actually kind of teaching a little bit of the Torah portion on the side, so to speak. And I was remarking that how wonderful it is, how absolutely wonderful it is to preach to the choir. So and because whenever you share some of these things with people of the world who have no faith, you get into arguments and dissension and disagreement. But not that we don't have disagreements, but we have the same foundation. And even our disagreements are to be a blessing to one another, an opportunity to learn more. And so I realized I really, really love preaching to the choir. It's wonderful. It's a great blessing. So it's a joyful one. And this particular Torah portion has a lot packed into it, a great deal packed into it. In fact, I read somewhere where there are more commandments in today's Torah portion than any other Torah portion, any other single Torah portion. It contains more actual commandments. So we'll reflect somewhat on that, but I want you to pay attention to I don't really need to tell you to pay attention to it. I was going to say to pay attention to the interpersonal relationships that are addressed in that. I realized as I thought of that pretty much the entire Torah portion is dealing with that. It's dealing with commandments to relating to how we deal with others. Even the ones that deal with animals on the literal level are still at the next level, which we sometimes call allegorical, are dealing with people as well. Because if we are enjoined to be considerate and treat animals well, how much more so in a similar circumstance and situation are we also to teach, to reach and relate to other people as well. So that kind of comes in. And so what I want to kind of focus on is yes, accept the commandments as they are literally stated, but pray for God's spiritual insight as well, so we can understand the spiritual force behind these commandments and the reasoning that God brings, or not the reasoning as much as perhaps the wisdom that God overlays all of his commandments with, and so that we realize that there is more here than meets the eye. And our application of God's word into our own lives and the lives of others will be a great blessing, even beyond the literal understanding and meaning of his word. The Torah portion, Parashah 49, Kitzi, when you go out, beginning with chapter 21, verse 10. When you go out to war, against your enemies, and Adonai your God hands them over to you, and you take prisoners, and you see among the prisoners a woman who looks good to you, and you feel attracted to her and want her as your wife, you are to bring her home to your house, where she will shave her head, cut her fingernails, and remove her prison clothing. She will stay there in your house, mourning her father and mother for a full month. After which you may go in to have sexual relations with her and be her husband. And she will be your wife. In the event that you lose interest in her, you are to let her go wherever she wishes, but you may not sell her for money or treat her like a slave, because you humiliated her. If a man has two wives, the one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and unloved wives have borne him children, and if the firstborn son is the child of the unloved wife, then when it comes time for him to pass his inheritance onto his sons, he may not give the inheritance due the firstborn to the son of the loved wife in place of the son of the unloved one, who is in fact the firstborn. No, he must acknowledge as firstborn the son of the unloved wife by giving him a double portion of everything he owns, for he is the first fruits of his manhood, and the right of the firstborn is his. If a man has a stubborn, rebellious son who will not obey what his father or mother says, and even after they discipline him, he still refuses to pay attention to them, then his father and mother are to take hold of him and bring him out to the leaders of his town at the gate of that place, and say to the leaders of his town, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He doesn't pay attention to us, lives wildly, gets drunk." Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. In this way, you will put an end to such wickedness among you, and all Yisrael will hear about it and be afraid. If someone has committed a capital crime and is put to death, then hung on a tree, his body is not to remain all night on the tree, but you must bury him the same day, because a person who has been hanged has been cursed by God, so that you will not defile your land, which Adonai your God is giving you to inherit. Chapter 22. You are not to watch your brother's ox or sheep straying and behave as if you hadn't seen it. You must bring it back to your brother. If your brother is not close by, or you don't know who the owner is, you are to bring it home to your house, and it will remain with you until your brother asks for it. Then you are to give it back to him. You are to do the same with his donkey, his coat, or anything else of your brother's that he loses. If you find something he lost, you must not ignore it. If you see your brother's donkey or ox collapsed on the road, you may not behave as if you hadn't seen it. You must help him get it up on its feet again. A woman is not to wear men's clothing, and a man is not to put on women's clothing. For whoever does these things is detestable to Adonai, your God. If, as you're walking along, you happen to see a bird's nest in a tree or on the ground with chicks or eggs, and the mother bird is sitting on the chicks or the eggs, you are not to take the mother with the chicks. You must let the mother go, but you may take the chicks for yourself, so that things will go well with you and you will prolong your life. When you build a new house, you must build a low wall around your roof. Otherwise, someone may fall from it, and you will be responsible for his death. You're not to sow two kinds of seed between your rows of vines. If you do, both the two harvested crops and the yield from the vines must be forfeited. You're not to plow with an ox and a donkey together. You're not to wear clothing woven with two kinds of thread, wool and linen together. You are to make for yourself twisted cords on the four corners of the garment you wrap around yourself. If a man marries a woman, has sexual relations with her, and then, having come to dislike her, brings false charges against her and defames her character by saying, I married this woman, but when I had intercourse with her, I did not find evidence that she was a virgin. Then the girl's father and mother are to take the evidence of the girl's virginity to the leaders of the town at the gate. The girl's father will say to the leaders, I let my daughter marry this man, but he hates her. So he has brought false charges that he didn't find evidence of her virginity. Yet, here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they will lay the cloth before the town leaders. The leaders of that town are to take the man, punish him, and fine him 2.5 pounds of silver shekels, which they will give to the girl's father, because he has publicly defamed a virgin of Israel. She will remain his wife, and he is forbidden from divorcing her as long as he lives. But if the charge is substantiated, that evidence for the girl's virginity could not be found, then they are to lead the girl to the door of her father's house, and the men of her town will stone her to death, because she has committed in Israel the disgraceful act of being a prostitute while still in her father's house. In this way, you'll put an end to such wickedness among you. If a man is found sleeping with a woman who has a husband, both of them must die. The man who went to bed with the woman and the woman too. In this way, you will expel such wickedness from Israel. If a girl who is a virgin is engaged to a man, and another man comes upon her in the town and has sexual relations with her, you are to bring them both out to the gate of the city and stone them to death. The girl, because she didn't cry out for help there in the city, and the man, because he has humiliated his neighbor's wife. In this way, you will put an end to such wickedness among you. But if the man comes upon the engaged girl out in the countryside, and the man grabs her and has sexual relations with her, then only the man who had intercourse with her is to die. You will do nothing to the girl, because she has done nothing deserving of death. The situation is like the case of the man who attacks his neighbor and kills him. For he found her in the countryside, and the engaged girl cried out, but there was no one to save her. If a man comes upon a girl who is a virgin, but who is not engaged, and he grabs her and has sexual relations with her, and they are caught in the act, then the man who had intercourse with her must give to the girl's father 1.25 pounds of silver shekels, and she will become his wife. Because he humiliated her, he may not divorce her as long as he lives. Chapter 23. A man is not to take his father's wife, thus violating his father's rights. A man with crushed or damaged private parts may not enter the assembly of Adonai. A son of a forbidden marriage may not enter the assembly of Adonai. Nor may his descendants down to the 10th generation enter the assembly of Adonai. No Ammoni or Moavi may enter the assembly of Adonai, nor may any of his descendants down to the 10th generation ever enter the assembly of Adonai, because they did not supply you with food and water when you were on the road after leaving Egypt, and because they hired Bilam, the son of Beor, from Petor in Aram Naharaim, to put a curse on you. But Adonai your God would not listen to Bilam. Rather, Adonai your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because Adonai your God loved you. So you are never to seek their peace or well-being as long as you live. But you are not to detest an Edomi, because he is your brother. And you are not to detest an Egyptian, because you lived as a foreigner in his land. The 3rd generation of children born to them may enter the assembly of Adonai. When you are in camp, at war with your enemies, you are to guard yourselves against anything bad. If there is a man among you who is unclean because of a nocturnal emission, he is to go outside the camp. He is not to enter the camp. When evening arrives, he is to bathe himself in water, and after sunset, he may enter the camp. Also, you are to have an area outside the camp to use as a latrine. You must include a trowel with your equipment, and when you relieve yourself, you are to dig a hole first, and afterwards cover your excrement. For Adonai, your God, moves about in your camp to rescue you and to hand over your enemies to you. Therefore, your camp must be a holy place. Adonai should not see anything indecent among you, or he will turn away from you. If a slave has escaped from his master and taken refuge with you, you are not to hand him back to his master. Allow him to stay with you in whichever place suits him best among your settlements. Do not mistreat him. No woman of Israel is to engage in ritual prostitution, and no man of Israel is to engage in ritual homosexual prostitution. Nothing earned through heterosexual or homosexual prostitution is to be brought into the house of Adonai your God in fulfillment of any vow. For both of these are abhorrent to Adonai your God. You're not to lend at interest to your brother, no matter whether the loan is of money, food, or anything else that can earn interest. To an outsider, you may lend at interest, but to your brother, you're not to lend at interest, so that Adonai your God will prosper you in everything you set out to do in the land you're entering in order to take possession of it. When you make a vow to Adonai your God, you're not to delay in fulfilling it. For Adonai your God will certainly demand it of you, and your failure to do so will be your sin. If you choose not to make a vow at all, that will not be a sin for you. But if a vow passes your lips, you must take care to perform it according to what you voluntarily vowed to Adonai your God, what you promised in words spoken aloud. When you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat enough grapes to satisfy your appetite, but you're not to put any in your basket. When you enter your neighbor's field of growing grain, you may pluck ears with your hand, but you are not to put a sickle to your neighbor's grain. Chapter 24. Suppose a man marries a woman and consummates the marriage, but later finds her displeasing because he has found her offensive in some respect. He writes her a divorce document, gives it to her, and sends her away from his house. She leaves his house, goes and becomes another man's wife. But the second husband dislikes her and writes her a get, gives it to her, and sends her away from his house. Or the second husband whom she married dies. In such a case, her first husband who sent her away may not take her again as his wife, because she is now defiled. It would be detestable to Adonai, and you are not to bring about sin in the land Adonai your God is giving you as your inheritance. If a man has recently married his wife, he is not to be subject to military service. He is to be free of external obligations and left at home for 1 year to make his new wife happy. No one may take a mill or even an upper millstone as collateral for a loan, because that would be taking as collateral the debtor's very means of sustenance. If a man kidnaps any of his brothers, fellow members of the community of Israel, and makes him his slave or sells him, that kidnapper must die. In this way, you will put an end to such wickedness among you. When there is an outbreak, a sara'at, be careful to observe and do just what the Kohanim, who are Levi'im, teach you. Take care to do this as I ordered them. Remember that Adonai your God, remember what Adonai your God did to Miriam on the road after you left Egypt. When you make any kind of loan to your neighbor, you are not to enter his house to take his collateral. You must stand outside, and the borrower will bring the collateral outside to you. If he is poor, you're not to go to bed with what he gave as collateral in your possession. Rather, you must restore the pledged item at sunset. Then he will go to sleep wearing his garment and bless you. This will be an upright deed of yours before Adonai your God. You are not to exploit a hard worker who is poor and needy, whether one of your brothers or a foreigner living in your land, in your town. You are to pay him his wages the day he earns them, before sunset, for he is poor and looks forward to being paid. Otherwise, he will cry out against you to Adonai, and it will be your sin. Fathers are not to be executed for the children, nor are children to be executed for the fathers. Every person will be executed for his own sin. You are not to deprive the foreigner or the orphan of the justice which is his due. And you are not to take a widow's clothing as collateral for a loan. Rather, remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and Adonai your God redeemed you from there. That is why I'm ordering you to do this. When harvesting the grain in your field, if you forgot a sheaf of grain there, you are not to go back and get it. It will remain there for the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow, so that Adonai your God will bless you in all the work you do. When you beat your olive tree, you're not to go back over the branches again. The olives that are left will be for the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow. When you gather the grapes from your vineyard, you're not to return and pick grapes a second time. What is left will be for the foreigner, orphan, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. That is why I'm ordering you to do this. Chapter 25. If people have a dispute, seek its resolution in court, and the judges render a decision in favor of the righteous one and condemning the wicked one, then, if the wicked one deserves to be flogged, the judge is to have him lie down and be flogged in his presence. The number of strokes is to be proportionate to the offense, but the maximum number is 40. He is not to exceed this. If he goes over this limit and beats him more than this, your brother will be humiliated before your eyes. You are not to muzzle an ox when it is treading out the grain. If brothers live together and one of them dies childless, his widow is not to marry someone unrelated to him. Her husband's brother is to go to her and perform the duty of a brother-in-law by marrying her. The first child she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, so that his name will not be eliminated from Israel. If the man does not wish to marry his brother's widow, then his brother's widow is to go up to the gate, to the leaders, and say, my brother-in-law refuses to raise up for his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother for me. The leaders of his town are to summon him and speak to him. If on appearing before them, he continues to say, I don't want to marry her, then his brother's widow is to approach him in the presence of the leaders, pull his sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who refuses to build up his brother's family. From that time on, his family is to be known in Israel as the family of the man who had his sandal pulled off. If men are fighting with each other, and the wife of one comes up to help her husband get away from the man attacking him by grabbing the attacker's private parts with her hand, You are to cut off her hand, show no pity. You are not to have in your pack two sets of weights, one heavy, the other light. You're not to have in your house two sets of measures, one big, the other small. You are to have a correct and fair weight, and you are to have a correct and fair measure, so that you will prolong your days in the land Adonai your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who deal dishonestly, are detestable to Adonai your God. Remember what Amalek did to you on the road as you were coming out of Egypt. How he met you by the road, attacked those in the rear, those who were exhausted and straggling behind when you were tired and weary. He did not fear God. Therefore, when Adonai your God has given you rest from all your surrounding enemies and the land Adonai your God is giving you as your inheritance to possess, you are to blot out all memory of Amalek from under heaven. Don't forget. Before I open for comments, I have one I would like to make. And that is from Deuteronomy chapter 24. There is the commandment. This is not the only place that is mentioned, but it's here in this Torah portion, Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 5. If a man has recently married his wife, he's not to be subject to military service. He is to be free of external obligations and left at home for 1 year to make his new wife happy. So, I have a question for the married men among us. You know who you are. Did you give your wife her happy year? Did you give your wife her happy year? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I might ask for a show of hands of your wives. That would be probably more accurate. Because our perception, not that you would be dishonest and say, oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. She was thrilled. All year, for an entire year, she was happy. She was happy. And
is there a makeup option?
You're asking for other options?
No, a makeup option.
A makeup. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that, Kevin. Because in some of our cases, I just discovered, I think, maybe it was yesterday, or maybe it's something that I knew but I'd forgotten. I have experienced some memory loss over the years. I sometimes tell people, I've forgotten more than I ever knew. And there's a lot of truth to that. But I sometimes say this about my beloved wife, Joanne, that she is much like Winston Churchill's wife, of whom he said, she is easily pleased with the very best. Now, I could be saying that as if this is like, well, she married me, right? Okay. But the point is, you could also say that in another way. You could actually say, that your wife is high maintenance. Now, that's not always said in an encouraging way, but you know what? I mean it to be an encouraging way. Because if your wife is high maintenance, then that is a high responsibility for you, her husband, to make her happy for an entire year. Now, it says that year, you're not even to go to military service. That is your focus. Even the very welfare of your nation, even the very existence of your nation. Because what if they lose the war because you were the one person that wasn't there to save the nation? See, we have an inflated view of ourselves, don't we? And so that sometimes affects our relationships with everyone, but even our wives. And then especially newlyweds. And we're like, you have been blessed with me, my beloved. Right? God has blessed you with me as your husband. So anyway, the point is, you are just as if you were at war, fighting for your country, for your nation, for the existence of your nation. With God in the camp, and all that blessing associated with that. This is not an excuse. This is not like a deferment from military service. It means you have a higher calling. Your higher calling is to make your wife happy. Okay. After quite a few decades now, I'm still trying to give my wife her happy year. I'm still trying. And that's the point. By devoting yourself, that first year is to get you off to a really good start. Because once you know how to make her happy, you are to keep her happy for the rest of your married life together. Because now you know. You devoted an entire year to that first year. That was your mission. That was your goal. God-given goal. God-commanded goal to make your wife happy. What a commandment. Lord, what a commandment. But what a blessing. What a blessing. To know your wife that well. To get to the point where you know that this is what makes my wife happy. Hallelujah. And this is how I am to live my life with my wife. And to keep her happy. Our whole life long through. That first year is a year of training. Do not worry. Your wife will let you know how well you are doing. Okay? And she is your teacher. God has enabled her to be your Ezer Kenegado. Your Ezer Kenegado. Which from one point of view is the one who is opposite you. Now, opposites attract. But in this particular sense, it is also the one who takes the opposing viewpoint to keep you on the straight and narrow, to expand your wisdom, because now you're not alone. You're not on your own. You have a precious soul, your soulmate, your wife. And together you, lifelong, will be a team working together. You have each other's back. You stand back to back against the world and against the wiles of Hasatan. tremendous blessing to have a worthy woman as your wife. Okay? And I dare say, not only will you make your wife happy, you will be happy as well. Okay, so that enough, right? Enough. Says, let me off the hook, guy. Take it easy on me. All right? Okay. Hey, I'll let the Lord work on your heart. He does a much better job of it than I could ever do. All I can do is, sometimes my better moments elicit guilt and place it upon other people.
Well, happy is the man whose wife is happy
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's a great blessing.
and belongs to Yah.
So, okay. So, we have some time for comments, don't we? Yes.
Hello. So we weren't keeping Torah when we got married, and my husband actually deployed 2 months after we got married, and he went to war. And then he came home, and we conceived, and a few months later he deployed again. And I had a baby, and everyone felt bad for me because he was in Iraq, and I didn't understand because I had a baby, and they weren't just saying congratulations.
Wow. Yeah.
And she looked just like her daddy. And that brought great comfort. I felt as if I had a part of him with me. And then I had my son, and I understood why everyone felt bad for me, because my husband was there for that. And his presence changed much. And there's no negative feelings towards my husband for deployments. I'm proud that I get to be his wife, and I'm proud of everything that he did in the Marine Corps. But this idea of that first year, him not even leaving to go to war, there's something really big there that I think men could take from this, that their presence is so important. And I think at this time, we can be physically present with each other and not be present. And so I just want to say that this used to be an issue for us, and it's so much better now with just a little bit of communication. But wives, if you feel like your husband is pulled in so many directions, first of all, see what you can do to help him out. But second of all, just tell him, hey, you're here, but I feel like we're not together. I feel like you're not here. Our phones are certainly a big problem. If you can turn the TV off, if you can shut the phone off or put it in another room and just be present. Presence with each other is so important, and it's missing in so many homes these days. And I just wanted to encourage the men out there that Yah is telling you to be present with your wife, because that is so important. So be present.
Thank you.
It's kind of a question.
It's particularly difficult for those of us guys who are more self-centered than others. I can say that from experience. Yes, Kevin.
Isn't that, I'm trying to jog my memory, isn't that why they do, like our youth group, or they do that song, that really fast song, they go around in circles, and isn't that song intended to say, look, we're single, we're gonna go fight the war for you because you just got married? Is that the tradition behind that song, that they go around in circles and so, yep, you say yes, okay. And I think it's awesome to think that is a tradition that they established that's biblical. That year you're supposed to be with, and I just brought that memory up about that song. That's cool.
Encouraging, thank you.
Thank you, Stevie. That was wonderful. In the passage that you were reading from, it has 3 or 4 commandments. They're not mixed together. The commandment breaks between commandments are Hebrew words that are homologues. They sound similar or alike in one verse, and then the next homologue, they're nouns, sounds very much like it in Hebrew. So the first, Stevie and I talked about this before, then in the sixth commandment, the end of the commandment where you started, verse 22:5 starts with a topic about a woman in a dress. Then verse 7 takes up the topic of an animal, and verse 8 takes up the topic of a house. Verse 9 takes up the topic of a field. Then verse 10 takes up again the topic of an animal. And verse 11 of the same chapter takes up the topic of a dress. So you have dress, animal, house, field animal house, or field animal dress. So you understand the break there occurred from the sixth commandment at the end of verse 8. And the seventh commandment starts at verse 9. And the break was topical there, not homologue in Hebrew. It was literally the topic. So the seventh commandment starts at verse 9 and goes through verse 19 of chapter 23. Commandment, the eighth commandment starts at verse 20 of chapter 23, continues through verse 7 of chapter 24. The ninth commandment at verse 8 there begins and continues through chapter 25, verse 4. So ninth commandment is that section. And then the 10th commandment begins and continues through the end of chapter 26. Hope that helps some people figure out, like, what are the topics here.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. I think Tony Robinson would be especially appreciative of that insight. Not all of us can be, but it's the thematic analysis is definitely there. And okay, that means we're out of time. So thank you for your attention today. God bless you. Amen.